My wife and I hadn't been getting along for a while. I'll admit that I have to take some of the blame, half of it, perhaps. Although, to be honest, I think 10% would be a more accurate figure. My contribution to the problem was my inability to believe that Nan wasn't cheating on me. She swore she wasn't, but I just couldn't believe her. We were at her company's Christmas party, and there was a lot of drinking. Nan loosens up a bit when she's had a drink or two, and it's sometimes amusing to watch her become the life of the party. I have 2 left feet and hate dancing, but Nan would live on the dance floor if she could. And that evening was no exception. She danced with everyone who asked her, nearly every man who danced with her kissed her if they caught her under the mistletoe. It was her party, and she was enjoying herself. So, I just sat back and watched. At the time, I didn't pay much attention, but looking back now, it seems like for every dance she had with someone else, she had to with her boss, Brian. I noticed, but I didn't think much of it then. That 3 times when she danced with Brian, he led her, or she led him, under the mistletoe. I had been taking photos, and about 3 hours into the party, I ran out of film. I had 2 more rolls in the pocket of my coat, so I got up and went to the cloakroom to retrieve them. My coat was hanging on the back row, and I was rummaging through the pockets looking for the film when I overheard a conversation between 2 women. "Can you believe it?" one said, and right in front of her husband. "He must be blind, maybe he's too busy taking photos to notice what she and Brian are up to. It's obvious to everyone, of course. All the guests know what's going on in Brian's office during lunch breaks." They left, and I found my film and returned to our table. Nan was sitting there and asked where I had gone. I told her I had gone to buy more film. I enjoy gossip as much as anyone else, and I was just about to ask her who Brian was having an affair with when one of her colleagues approached and invited her to dance. I made a mental note to get the full story out of her on the way home. Another hour passed. I wasn't paying much attention to Nan since she was on the dance floor the entire time, and I lost sight of her. I went to use the restroom, and as I was walking out, I saw Nan step out of a room further down the corridor and quickly head back to the dance hall. I wasn't sure, but it looked like she was fastening her blouse as she exited. I stood there watching her walk down the corridor back into the hall, wondering if I had really seen what I thought I did. I don't know why I did it, probably out of curiosity, but I walked over to the room Nan had exited, opened the door, and peeked inside. There was a man standing with his back to me, his right hand moving, and I heard the sound of a zipper being fastened. He turned around, and I saw that it was Brian. "I'm looking for Nan," I said. "Someone told me they saw her come in here." "They must have been mistaken, she wasn't here," he replied. "I see that." "Sorry for intruding," I said, as I spoke. A quick glance revealed that his zipper was still undone. I turned and walked back to our table. Man had exited that room, and he claimed she wasn't there. She had been fastening her blouse, and he had been zipping his pants, and I began to have a bad feeling about it. 5 minutes later, Brian returned to the room. As soon as I saw him sit down, I got up and went back to that room. I entered and looked around. It was clearly a conference room. There was a long, rectangular table with 8 chairs around it, a trash bin in the corner, and nothing else. I looked at the table where Brian had been standing and noticed that 2 chairs in that area had been pushed apart to create some open space on the table. In front of that spot were a few wet stains, pale, almost milky white wet stains. I walked over to that area, looked down, and visualized it in my mind, Nan lying on her back, Brian taking her, and their fluids dripping onto the table. From where I stood, I could see into the trash bin. Something pink caught my eye, and when I looked closer, I saw it was a white handkerchief with pink initials NCD embroidered on it. It was one of 6 handkerchiefs I had given Nan for her birthday. I picked it up. It was wet. I brought it to my nose and smelled her scent mixed with a faint hint of something else, which I bet was Brian's essence. This triggered another image in my mind, the 2 of them finishing their act, Nan standing up and wiping herself with the handkerchief before tossing it into the trash. I stood there as my mind absorbed all the information, piecing it together and examining it from every angle. The woman I overheard in the cloakroom, all her dances with Brian, and the kisses under the mistletoe, Nan fastening her blouse as she left the room, Brian zipping up his pants when I entered the room and denying that Nan had been in there. Nan's handkerchief was wet, which I was certain she had used. I came to the conclusion that my wife had been cheating on me with her boss. There wasn't a single definitive piece of evidence, but the circumstantial proof, at least for me, was undeniable. I returned to the party and took my seat. I had been gone for no more than 5 minutes, and when I left, Nan had been on the dance floor with Todd. She was still there with him when I came back. The music stopped as the band finished their final track, and Todd walked Nan back to the table. I carefully observed her, trying to detect any signs of guilt or deceit, but I saw nothing unusual. 20 minutes later, Nan and I put on our coats and headed home. As soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, I said, "You're hiding something from me, sweetheart." "What do you mean?" she asked. "You know I'm like an old gossip when it comes to rumors," I said, and then I told her about what I had overheard in the cloakroom. "Why have you never told me about this?" She turned away from me, and it was too dark in the car to see the expression on her face when she said, "I didn't hear anything like that." I changed the subject. "You definitely looked sexy tonight on the dance floor, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought so. Watching you made me want something. Why don't you sit here with me and let me show you?" "Not tonight, Rob. I'm tired, and all I want is to go home and sleep." "That's not fair." "What do you mean?" "I've been trying to make love to you all day, but you kept telling me to wait until we got home tonight. I've spent the entire day waiting, wandering around, counting down until the party was over. I'm sorry, darling. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. Are you sure there isn't another reason you don't want to make love to me tonight?" "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "Think about it, sweetheart, just think." "No, Rob, I want to know what you're implying." "No, you don't understand, Nan. You don't want to know what I'm implying, you really don't want to know. We'll get home, I'll get some sleep, and tomorrow we'll see if my mood changes." "No, Rob, not tomorrow, right now. I want to know right now." "Fine, you want it now. You got it. I think you don't want to make love tonight because you're too scared to let me near you. You don't want me to find out that I won't be the first one to touch you tonight." "What the hell are you accusing me of?" Nan asked. "I'm accusing you of cheating on me, Nan. I'm accusing you of sleeping with Brian tonight at the party, and I'm accusing you of being the woman those ladies were talking about when I was in the cloakroom getting my film. How dare you? You're out of your mind." "Really? Well, let me break it down for you, Nan." I told her everything I had seen and what I discovered when I went back to the conference room. "This is everything. Nan, refusing sex tonight is just the final nail in the coffin. You can't bear to let me confirm that I'm getting sloppy seconds. That's just ridiculous, Rob. I don't understand how you can believe I'd do something like that." "All right, Nan, let's hear your explanations first. I told you I've never heard anything about what supposedly happens in Brian's office. Yes, I danced with him a lot tonight, but since you can't or won't dance with me, I dance with anyone who asks. Brian happened to ask more often than anyone else. What does that prove? As for the kisses under the mistletoe, that's nothing new. It happens every year, and you've never complained about it before. We went into that room because Brian wanted to tell me in private that starting next year, I'll be promoted to head of the accounting department. My handkerchief was in the trash because I spilled my drink on the table, wiped it up with the handkerchief, and didn't want to put a wet handkerchief back in my bag, so I threw it away. As for me buttoning my blouse, I think you imagine that. I have no idea what Brian was doing with his zipper. Why did he say you weren't in the room? Probably because he thought if you knew I was in there with him, you'd start coming up with the same ridiculous ideas you have now. I've said everything I have to say about this. Believe it or don't, it makes no difference to me. The rest of the drive home was spent in silence. Once we were inside the house, Man went into our bedroom, grabbed a pillow, and headed for the guest room. I undressed, got into bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling until I fell asleep. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and reading the morning paper, when Nan entered the room. She poured herself a cup of coffee and went into the living room. I finished the paper, rinsed my coffee cup, and went to the garage to change the oil in the car. After finishing that, I came back inside and settled down to watch some football. The game had just started when Nan walked into the room and sat at the table. "So, has a good night's sleep cleared all that nonsense out of your head?" I looked at her and said, "No, actually, I'm even more convinced now that I was right." "Three things, Nan, I caught you lying. I replayed in my mind everything I saw and realized I did see exactly what I thought I did, and finally, your own actions last night after I confronted you face to face." "You're impossible, Rob. What lie are you accusing me of? What actions of mine convinced you to be so sure about what you think you saw?" "The lie was about the handkerchief. Actually, it was two lies. The first was when you said you used it to wipe up a spilled drink. You drink scotch on the rocks, and Brian drinks vodka tonic. None of these drinks are milky white, but the stains on the table were milky white, just like semen. I sniffed the handkerchief when I pulled it out of the trash can, and it didn't smell like alcohol, it smelled like sex. And I know your smell well enough to recognize it. If that wasn't enough, neither scotch nor vodka leaves a crust when it dries. The handkerchief is in my coat pocket, and I checked it again this morning. It's all crusted over, just like it would be if you wiped yourself off after you and Brian finished having sex on that table. The second lie was when you said you threw it away because you didn't want to put a wet rag in your purse when you came out of that room. You weren't carrying a purse, you weren't holding anything when you left that room. And I know because I saw you fastening your blouse with both hands. Finally, what you did when we got home last night actually was two things: what you did and what you didn't do. All you did was grab a pillow and distance yourself from me as much as possible. You didn't dare take the chance that I might touch you when we got into bed because you knew what I might find. As for what you didn't do, that's the flip side of the same coin. All you needed to do while acting so indignant was to lift your skirt and tell me to check for myself. You could have told me to touch you, lean in, and see for myself that I was wrong. You could have proved that I was being foolish, but you didn't, did you, Nan? No, you didn't. You've been exposed, and the only thing left for me now is to decide what I'm going to do about it. I stood up and walked out of the room. For the next couple of days, we avoided each other. The entire time, I was racking my brain over what to do next. Everything was made more complicated by the fact that I had loved Nan from the moment I first saw her. Until that ridiculous Christmas party, I believed she loved me just as much as I loved her, and that we had a great marriage. How could I just walk away from that after 15 years? I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The thought of not being with her was unbearable, yet I couldn't stand to be near her. It was in this frame of mind that I consulted a divorce attorney. He was very straightforward about the situation. I had no evidence, so any divorce proceedings would come down to a he said, she said scenario, and I would likely lose. I earned more than Nan, which meant I would end up paying alimony. Everything we owned would be split 50-50ths, and I would also have to cover both attorney's fees and court costs for my share. Even if I had proof that she had cheated, the outcome wouldn't change much. I might avoid paying alimony and her attorney's fees, but everything else would remain nearly the same. He advised me to work on saving the marriage. If I couldn't do that, I should hire a private investigator to gather evidence against her, then return to him for further action. I sat in the living room, staring off into space, sipping a beer and mulling over what the attorney had said. When Nan came home from work, she entered the room, sat down, looked at me for a couple of minutes, and then said, "Rob, we can't keep going on like this. I know what you're thinking, and you're wrong, but I have no way to prove it to you. I could bring in people from work to tell you that I don't spend my lunch breaks in Brian's office, but you wouldn't believe them because they're my friends. I could bring Brian himself to you, and he would tell you there's nothing between us, but you wouldn't believe him either. I love you, Rob, and I don't want our marriage to fall apart. What the hell does that mean? I asked. I'm quitting my job today. I can't work for Brian while you're thinking what you're thinking. My marriage means more to me than this job. I need you to leave those thoughts behind, and I need you to forgive me in your mind, even if I haven't done anything to deserve forgiveness. Just tell yourself, all right, she messed up, but she loves me, and I forgive her. I really do love you, Rob. I mean it, and I don't want our marriage to fall apart. Well, I truly loved her, so I forgave her. But I knew I could never forget. We reconciled and moved forward, but things were never the same after that. 2 years passed, and Nan received an invitation to a class reunion. Honestly, I didn't want to go, but she kept insisting until I finally gave in and agreed. The drive took 5 hours, and by the time we arrived, I had convinced myself that I might actually enjoy the event. My graduating class had been 2 years ahead of Nan's, but I still knew a few people there. The first person I saw upon entering the hotel ballroom was Michelle, one of Nan's classmates and a longtime friend of mine. I suppose I should really say a special longtime friend. She was wearing a black cocktail dress that fell just above her knees, and in her black high heels, she looked absolutely stunning. She was surrounded by a group of former jocks who looked like they had let themselves go quite a bit. I felt a stir in my pants as I remembered that night at the drive-in theater when we freed each other from the burden of our virginity. At the time, I thought we had a love that would last forever. But 2 months later, she dumped me for a college guy who eventually dumped her. She tried to come back to me, but I told her to go to hell. 6 months later, I left for college and hadn't seen her since. I wondered if she would recognize me and what she might do if she did. I remembered the day I'd sent her to hell and the slap I'd gotten in return. I did recognize a few other people at the reunion, but I wasn't close enough with any of them to sit and chat. So, I followed Nan's lead, sitting wherever she sat and moving whenever she moved. I stuck to my usual behavior, sitting, sipping my drink, and taking pictures. Nan stuck to hers, drinking more than she should and spending most of her time on the dance floor. A steady stream of former boyfriends came to our table, asking Nan to dance. I noticed that before I arrived, she had danced even more frequently and seemed to have gotten a bit closer to Bill Moser, her old boyfriend. I had learned my lesson from the Christmas party and kept a close eye on Nan whenever we attended gatherings. I saw Nan and Bill leave through a door together, and a few minutes later, I got up and followed them. I didn't see them anywhere, so I was about to start searching for them, but nature called first. After using the restroom, I walked down the hallway, checking door handles and pressing my ear against those that were locked. As I approached the cloakroom, I heard giggling. Quietly stepping closer, I peeked around the doorway and saw Nan kneeling, her chest spilling out from under her dress, swaying slightly as her head moved back and forth. Silently, I backed away, hurried to our table, grabbed my camera, and headed toward the cloakroom. As I was leaving the ballroom, Michelle intercepted me. "Do you have any idea where your wife and my husband disappeared to?" she asked. "Bill is your husband, unfortunately yes." She then added, "Then take off your heels and follow me, you'll need to be very quiet." She slipped off her high heels, and we silently headed toward the cloakroom. I peeked through the doorway and saw Nan still on her knees. I quickly stepped to the side and started taking pictures. When the flash went off, Bill yelled, "What the hell?" Nan screamed, and I just kept documenting the moment for posterity. By the time they realized what was happening, I had all the photos I wanted. Nan was crying, and Michelle was hurling every insult she could think of. "Bill," I turned to leave, but Michelle called out, "Wait, Rob." I turned around and saw her slipping her heels back on as she walked toward me. "What are you going to do, to walk away from that pathetic deceiver?" Can I get copies of those photos? She asked. As many as you want, I replied. What are you going to do right now? She pressed. I'm heading back to the hotel, grabbing my things, and leaving. What about Nan? She asked. She can hitchhike or walk for all I care. Bill and I take turns driving tonight, he's drinking, and I'm the driver. She then suggested, want to grab a cup of coffee somewhere? I named the place, Denny's at the corner of 6th and Wilmont. She added, it'll be at least 30 minutes before I can get there. I need to get out of this hotel before that trash catches up to me. I don't want to see her again. See you there in 30 minutes. I went back to the hotel, grabbed my bags, and stopped at the front desk to check out. The man at the desk said there was a message for me and handed it over. It was from Nan, asking me not to do anything rash and to wait for her. I told him my wife would still be staying until checkout time, paid the bill, and left. Michelle was sitting at a table when I arrived at Denny's, and I joined her. We sat, had coffee, and chatted for a bit before she said, I never forgot you. I never forgave you for the way you talked to me when I tried to crawl back to you, not that I didn't deserve it, but you could have been a little gentler. I replied, what can I say? I was young. The love of my life had just dumped me for some thick-headed college guy, and I was full of anger. She added, if a couple more months had passed, I might have let it go. The love of your life, you'll never know how crushed I was. Speaking of love, what are you going to do now? I'll head home to settle the bills, cancel the credit cards, and contact a lawyer. Aren't you going to talk to her? Been there, done that, and it didn't help. Remember the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Yes, well, this was the second time, at least the second time I know about. What about you? We live in an apartment that belonged to him before we got married, so I'm moving out tomorrow morning. I'll try to get to the bank before he does and access the safety deposit box. While I was waiting for you, I transferred all the money from our joint accounts to an account I had before we got married. You're not planning to talk to him either, are you? This is my third husband, Rob, and he knows my first 2 marriages ended because I caught them cheating on me. He knew when we got married that I wouldn't give him any leeway in that department. How much stuff do you have? Will it all fit in one car? I could load everything into my car and yours, then let's do it. We finished our coffee, drove to her place, and spent 2 hours moving everything she wanted. What now? I asked. Find a room, wake me up with a call at 7, so I can be at the bank when it opens. What if he beats you there? He won't do that, he'll go back to the apartment and crash. I doubt he'll even notice I'm gone until he wakes up around 10. What about you? I'll head home and start preparing. Do you really have to leave right now? I can't leave until we find a place for your things, unless you want to leave them in the cars and move to Colorado Springs. There's nothing keeping me here, I think I could find a job in Colorado Springs. Hell, why not? How do you feel about revenge? What do you mean? I still need a place to stay until morning. I really don't want to be alone tonight. You could stay with me, and maybe we could find a way to settle the score. I wouldn't be opposed to that, not at all. We checked into the Days Inn and requested a wake-up call for 7 though. It turned out we didn't need it. We stayed up all night. The moment the door closed behind us, Michelle started undressing. I followed her lead, and she giggled when she noticed my already aroused state. We a little eager, aren't we? She teased. Come on, darling, your former love of a lifetime is going to show you what you've been missing all these years by not taking me back when you had the chance. She reached out gently, took my hand, and led me to the bed. Sitting me down, kneeling in front of me, she began to kiss me intimately. Her touch was warm and deliberate. She continued her movements slow and tender, her eyes meeting mine with a playful smile as she rested her head against me. Keep this up, and I might just lose control, I murmured. We wouldn't want that, would we? she teased, her voice soft before continuing with light kisses and soft touches. "Oh God," I groaned, my hands resting on her shoulders. My body tensed as I reached the peak of my release. She didn't stop her movements until I relaxed completely. Afterward, I pulled her up onto the bed beside me and said with a grin, "Now it's my turn." I leaned down and kissed her softly on the lips. Our connection was deep and passionate. We shared another intimate moment, full of warmth and connection, drawing even closer to one another. Michelle was standing at the bank's entrance when it opened, and 20 minutes later, she was driving behind me on our way to Colorado Springs. My cell phone rang every 15 minutes, and I saw from the caller ID that it was Nan, so I ignored the calls. 30 minutes outside of the Springs, I called a mobile locksmith and arranged for him to meet me at my house before leaving the motel where Michelle and I had stayed. I asked her what kind of work she was looking for, and she said she was a legal secretary. After setting up the locksmith appointment, I called our company lawyer and asked if he knew anyone who might need an experienced legal secretary. "Funny you should ask," he said. "Not 5 minutes ago, Betty gave me her 2 weeks' notice. She's leaving to get married, and she and her new husband are moving to Florida." "Why do you ask?" "I have a friend moving to the Springs who's looking for a job. Have her give me a call." "Are you too busy to talk now?" "No, stay by the phone." I hung up and called Michelle on her cell, gave her Ben's number, and asked her to call him as soon as possible. When we arrived at the house, the locksmith was already waiting for us. Within an hour, all the locks had been changed. Michelle told me she had an appointment with Ben at 3 p.m. We found a storage facility, rented a unit, and unloaded both cars, I said. "Next step is to find a couple of apartments." "Why?" she asked. "To last night seemed to show that we're a good fit for each other. Why not share an apartment?" "Maybe after the divorce," I replied, "but until I sort that out, I don't want to give Nan anything she could use against me. We can stay at a motel for now until you figure out if Ben is going to hire you. Then we can look for an apartment." "If you're planning to live in an apartment, why did you change the locks on your house to keep Nan out?" she inquired. "I don't want her rummaging through everything," I explained. "We'll split everything 50-50, but I plan to have significant influence over what she gets as her share of that 50%. We booked a motel room, Michelle left her car there, and I drove her to Ben's office. I introduced them to each other, told her I'd pick her up later, and left to take care of my errands. First, I went to the bank, closed all joint accounts, and opened new ones in my name only. Then I emptied the safety deposit box that Nan and I shared and transferred everything to a box registered solely to me. I stopped by my office and used the company phone to cancel all joint credit cards, and then I headed back to Ben's office. When I arrived, Ben was showing her around the office, pointing out where everything was. "Is that a good sign?" I asked. "I've hired her, and she starts in a week," he said. "I wanted her to come in next week, but she said she needs time to find an apartment and settle in." I drove her back to the motel, dropped her off, and told her I'd return at 7 o'clock to take her out to dinner. Meanwhile, my cell phone kept ringing. Nan was trying to reach me non-stop, so I finally answered her call. "Where are you?" she demanded. "I'm at home," I replied. "Why did you run off and leave me?" "That's a silly question, man," I said, "considering what you were doing in that cloakroom. How am I supposed to get home? Walk, hitchhike, take a bus, convince Bill to give you a ride?" I sighed. "I don't care when you do get here, you'll need to call me so I can come and let you in." "Why would I need to do that?" I asked. "Because I've changed all the locks to keep you out. I don't want you in this house when I'm not there. I don't trust you not to try and clean the place out. We'll let the courts decide who gets what if we can't come to an agreement," Nan said. "Court? What does the court have to do with this?" I asked. "That's where it all ends when people get divorced." "Divorce? Why are you talking about divorce?" "There's no need for that, darling," she pleaded. Okay, I drank too much and let myself get dragged into something I shouldn't have, but I love you, Rob. You know I do. We'll be fine, I said. There's no need for a divorce. Sorry, man. I was weak and let you off the hook for what you did with Brian. That's not going to happen again. Call me on my cell when you get back into town, and I'll arrange to meet you at the house. I hung up the phone. I picked up Michelle at 7 o'clock and we headed out for dinner. Afterward, Michelle said, I feel like getting a little more revenge. How about you? Oh God, I don't know if I can handle this, I said. I'll take care of you on the way back to the motel, she assured me. Well, damn girl, you drive a hard bargain. Count me in. I managed to get us to the motel without crashing the car, and the night turned out to be quite eventful. Waking up in each other's arms, she looked at me with a playful smile. What now? She asked. Maybe we take a shower and see where it leads, I suggested. I like the way you think, she replied, got up, took my hand, and led me to the shower. The next morning, I met with a divorce attorney and handed him the photos I had taken of Nan in the cloakroom with Bill. After that, the process began. Nan returned to town, and I met her at the house. She did everything she could to talk me out of the divorce, telling me she loved me and only me, and that Bill had been nothing more than a drunken mistake. I told her I wasn't buying it, that I had already met with a lawyer, and that she would be served the papers any day now. We then went through the house, arguing over who would get what. Once we settled everything, I packed up the things I wanted, handed her the keys to the house, and left. Michelle and I had 2 wonderful weeks together before I told her I wouldn't be able to see her again until the divorce was finalized. She wasn't happy about it, but understood why it had to be that way. It turned out to be the right decision because I later found out that Nan had hired a private investigator to follow me and try to dig up anything she could use to challenge the photos I had of her and Bill. Once the divorce was finalized, I expected Michelle and I to continue our relationship, but it wasn't meant to be. The divorce took nearly 7 months, and while I was busy keeping my distance from her, Michelle met someone else and started a relationship with him. Everything turned out pretty much as the attorney had predicted when I first met with him after the mess with Nan and Brian. Everything was split 50-50ths, but given the circumstances, I didn't have to pay Nan alimony or cover her attorney's fees. Although I did have to pay the court costs, what annoyed me most was that she would be entitled to half of my pension. The upside, however, is that she won't receive a cent of it until I actually retire, and I have another 20 years to go before that happens. A lot can happen in 20 years. I just hope that one morning I wake up to hear she got hit by a bus or a drunk driver. A guy can only hope.